founder, chief executive officer of Grand Round. Welcome to Juicing with Gary.
Gary, good to see you.
I made a special juice just for you, Owen. And you know what it's called?
No.
Bugs. You know why? Oh, what's up, dog? What's cooking? Hey, look out, stop. You're gonna hit someone with that old shotgun. Now we're gonna get to make
Carrots are gonna feature central.
You're gonna love the carrots. They're gonna go in
All right.
next to last. But I want you to start to cut some of these fruits for us.
You got it.
And I want you to get this lovely red apple. And by the way, an amazing kitchen, amazing staff, so we're happy to be here cooking with you today and juicing. Okay, so now we're gonna make it a juice. All right, let's go.
Down the hatch.
Down the hatch. Let's give them, there you go.
Yeah.
Look at you. Now we're gonna go with oranges and waiting to smell the orange.
All right.
All right, there you go. Okay, now.
Carrots.
We're gonna go with carrots.
I'm gonna break these just so
Oh,
we
it'll take them right in. You go ahead. There you go. Looks like bugs running around. Okay, all right. So we got it the juice. All right. Okay, here you go. You get your straw. All right. Just look at this. This is unbelievable, right? Beautiful. It turned out perfect. Well, listen, first of all, thank you.
You're good health.
Thank you. So good health. Thank you. Huh?
That's really good.
See? What do you
Nice
think? I don't know what I'm
job.
doing?
Nice
Come
job.
on. The insurance
Nice
guys
job.
can make juice.
That's
Come on.
delicious.
Well, Owen, thanks again for having us here at Grand Round. I've been involved with the product itself, and I have seen it in my own organization that I had it at. I have seen it change people's lives. But let's start with you.
The story at the very beginning isn't super interesting. I'm a kid from New England. I did okay in school, not spectacularly. Where I really started to feel a passion for all of what would later become in my career was in college, where I started writing software. And I started discovering this thing called the internet, and I made connections around the world, and I used data to solve different problems. Fast forward a few years, what I found was missing, and what ultimately led me to a place like Grand Rounds was the desire to actually turn all of that into good, to do something with this kind of newfound skill around software and data that would allow people to live better, fuller, happier lives.
And let's talk a little bit about Grand Rounds.
Please.
And let's talk about your co-founding partner.
Sure.
I love the story. I've heard it. Can you share where the vision came from?
Absolutely. So Dr. Hoffman is the chief of interventional radiology at Stanford. He is one of the finest surgeons in the world on the treatment of blood clots, the kinds of blood clots that can show up in the legs. So he's one of these luminaries. He knows lots of things, and he is connected to lots of people. But when his kid got sick with an illness that was almost certainly going to be a killer, or historically has been a killer, Dr. Hoffman didn't actually know how to treat him himself, and even within his local environment of physicians, he didn't have the answer. So he had to go out and access unpublished papers, research that hadn't made it to the public, frankly hadn't made it out of the institution where it was developed, to discover the cure that he ultimately applied to his kid's life. Grady, his son, is now living a very complete and full life many, many years later. Prognosis and everything from here on out looks great. But it was that founding insight, or that moment, that experience, that said to us, we need to do something to allow everybody to experience that sort of expertise, personalized expertise, driven at the moment of most critical need. And so that's where Grand Rounds really came from. I remember the first time we sat together at Stanford Medical School, and he was really interested in how he could bring physicians into a platform to drive better care and good experience. And I was fascinated with the idea of how could technology actually drive better outcomes for people, better connectivity, better data sharing. And so it was over that kind of spark of partnership that this all happened. We believe that the American healthcare system is actually a great healthcare system when used properly. We have the best medicine, we have the best science, we have the best technology. What we sometimes fail to do is bring those things together appropriately and on time. And so at Grand Rounds, we're obsessed with really one piece of the equation, which is how do you match a patient in need with a doctor or another medical provider who is uniquely qualified and positioned to solve the pain and suffering of that patient. And that may sound incredibly simple, Gary, but just think about all the problems that that implies and how hard it is for us to do that today. When we get sick, we ask questions like, what doctor should I go to? Or is this the right treatment? Or is this the right diagnosis? Grand Rounds intends to answer all of those questions using a network of experts, using our own in-house medical care team, and more than anything else, using a whole truckload of data to supply evidence-based answers for what patients need when they need it.
So my son is sick.
Yeah.
I don't know what to do. It's like you just said, I have a doctor, a provider who just said, we have a problem here.
Yeah, yeah.
Is this the right diagnosis? Is this the
Yeah.
right place to go? I'm scared. I'm not a professional, right? So
Yeah.
how does it work? What do I do?
And our job in those moments is actually twofold, right? So we want to get the best answer for you, regardless of the clinical severity. But we also want to meet you where you are, both as a caregiver in the example that you just gave, or the patient if you're suffering from it yourself. So the goal is you're going to call, and within seconds, you're going to connect with somebody on our team who's going to take a breath with you. We're going to help you understand really where are you on this part of the journey. We're going to explain some of those questions that you need to have answered right away. And we're going to start to direct you to resources within the Grand Rounds world. Resources like the expert medical opinion, where we connect you with somebody who probably wrote the textbook on the condition if it's highly complex. Or the on-site visit, where we'll book an appointment for you. We'll send ahead your medical records. We'll give you some questions to ask to that local doctor. Or perhaps we'll just complete the consultation right there. If it's within our power to do so, and you have the relationship and you're ready for it, maybe we'll talk you through what treatment you could consider for whatever it is you're dealing with. But the point is you have to meet the patient where he or she is. If you try to force one kind of monolithic solution, probably not going to work.
So if my son or daughter or myself has multiple conditions and complications, it may be a series of these experts.
That's right. And they may be actually working with each other. And that's kind of part of the magic, right? So let's imagine, let's pick cancer just because I think it lends itself well to this story. In cancer care, it's almost never the case you'd work with one doctor. You might have a medical oncologist, you might have a surgeon, you might have a radiation expert, you might have a pathologist who's reviewing tissue samples, an immunologist. You could have lots of different people, a hematologist. So imagine a virtual clinic of these people working together, talking to each other and to you to figure out what the right path forward is and using all of the same data. And that's what we've built. So the idea would be that your medical oncologist could be at the Dana-Farber Cancer Institute and your pathologist could be at Duke, and they could work collaboratively to being the best in their field on your particular issue.
So they're basically coming up with a treatment plan for me and a
exactly
roadmap
right.
on
Yep.
how we're going to need to navigate the system. And so how does the local physician feel about that when I have diagnosed something and what your team's coming back
Yeah.
with is maybe a change in the diagnosis or a change in the protocol?
Yeah. So great question. The local physician, if they are a good local physician, feels great about it. Because what's it doing? It's giving them access to somebody who probably taught their residency program or was a lecturer at their medical school or who they'd love to go see a lecture from at the National Association of whatever the specialty is. So doctors, the good ones at any rate, are always hungry for the latest research, the latest ways of approaching a disease. I'd say a not great doctor will be defensive about that. Why would you ask somebody else for their opinion on it? The good news is I think we see that in less than 0.1% of cases, so it's really uncommon. The last thing I'd say about this, and this is really cool and it kind of gives you an idea of some of the things we want to do in the future, is we named ourselves Grand Rounds for a reason. As you know, Grand Rounds is the tradition of experts in the medical field teaching other doctors about their expertise and about their research. Because ultimately, Gary, I don't really want to be doing second opinions for everybody 20 years from now and finding that 67% of those cases result in a change in treatment or diagnosis, which they do today. No, in 20 years, what I'm hoping our legacy is, these guys made the American healthcare system the outstanding healthcare system it could be by taking knowledge and diffusing it out of the places where it sits. And that goes back to the founding story of what Rusty and I really wanted to solve for.
So, Owen, you just hit me with a fact that I didn't know, 67% somewhere around potential misdiagnosis. I mean, is that possible? And talk about that.
Yeah, misdiagnosis or change in treatment. So if that didn't scare you, Gary, it should have, because what that means is that the average case that comes into Grand Rounds, or at least 2/3 of them, our experts come back and say, dear patient, either your diagnosis, what you have, is wrong, or the way that we plan to treat it is wrong. And so these aren't small changes. These are material changes where people are changing a surgical approach, telling you that the drug isn't going to work or is going to cause an interaction with another drug you're taking, et cetera, et cetera. These are real concerning issues. And it probably means that the model actually should be used for more of the patients who are dealing with these complex issues.
All right, so now I have a treatment plan. I have hope. I have this expert opinions that are around. How does Grand Rounds stay with me? Because I have to imagine, for the most part, especially when you get into complex cases, right?
That's right.
It's just not, well, here you go, good luck, see you.
Yeah.
You know, follow the orders and we'll be good. So
Yeah,
how
you
does
drop
that
them off at
process-
the side of the road, $20 for lunch money, and say goodbye. Well, that's unfortunately the way that the American healthcare system was designed to work, and it is not the way that Grand Rounds works. So when we get you the expert opinion or we set you up with a local doctor, that's just the beginning. We're going to go re-get that medical record for you. It's going to be added nicely to your timeline, and we're going to have a conversation with you, not just next week or a month later, but for the following year to make sure that you are staying on track with what your goals are. That might not be the most sexy part of what we do, but in some ways it's the way that we make sure that all of this expertise doesn't go to waste, that we've given you a way to actually follow through on the things that have been recommended. Part of it is, and I think you've got to this, people are afraid. And they're afraid of a couple things. And they're not usually most afraid of actually the medical pain. They're really afraid of feeling stupid. And they're afraid of asking a question that's inappropriate. And so if we break it down for them, if we show them we're going to be an advocate, that we're never going to leave them, that we're going to translate this crazy medical language that they've heard to real human English, then they tend to stick with it and they call us for the other issue in the future.
I'm sure you have stories,
Yeah.
lots of stories. Can you share a story or two of somebody's impact? Somebody who's gone through something here at Grand Rounds,
Yeah,
and so we
well-
get a feel for what that experience is.
Yeah, I mean, I'm going to start with my own experience simply because I can tell it in a level of detail that's easier for me to tell than other stories. I went to my primary care doctor, the guy I had seen for a couple of years, and nice fellow, but I described these symptoms to him. You know, the hearing loss, the numbness in the face, and he said it was eustachian tube dysfunction, which is a pretty common and really benign condition. So he diagnosed me with this condition that was pretty straightforward and benign. He said, take a couple of Sudafed, you'll be fine. But the symptoms never really got better. And finally, I engaged Grand Rounds. I probably should have done it from the beginning. And they paired me up with an expert, and what we discovered was ultimately way more difficult. I had a benign brain tumor sitting behind my ear here and pushing down on my nerve and actually crushing the back of my brainstem. And it was only through that intervention that I realized that I actually had a much more serious problem on my hand. They fixed the expert opinion. I got a surgical approach. I went down to a place that does more of these per year than anywhere else in the area. Guaranteed good conditions for ICU recovery, all that sort of stuff. And I had this 11-hour brain surgery, which is crazy. But here's the deal. Most people don't have access to that sort of intervention, let alone access to know where to go when you need it. And here I am sitting with you 2 years later, tumor-free, had that checkup last summer, feeling great. But I can only imagine what somebody who didn't have that sort of access and connection could be feeling like 2 years after that first diagnosis.
So, Owen, thanks for having us here today. I just want to encourage you, and I know you will, just keep going strong, because together we really can make a difference in the system.
Right on.
Right on.
Good to see you, old friend.
Great seeing you. Cheers.
Cheers.